When people ask me, what's so special about First Baptist on Fifth? I answer quickly. It's not our building, though lovely, or our worship, though meaningful, not our gatherings, though life-giving, or even our missions and ministries in the world, though impactful. The very best part of First on Fifth? Our people, hands down. In our Confession of Identity, we said this of our community. Here, you'll see retirees and families with rambunctious little ones, teenagers discovering their identities, middle-agers juggling all the demands of this season, young people navigating adulthood for the first time, and seniors rich in wisdom and encouragement. You can read our fiery op-eds in the paper, pass us moving about on the city streets, see us building ramps for the underserved, catch us finding beauty in our gardens and on hiking trails, and experience us taking delight in the world. At the core of our community, we are folks who love each other well. And at the core of our life together, we share in meaningful conversation about what it means to live and love in this world. That's what you'll hear and who you'll hear from in our new podcast series called Life Together. Each episode will be hosted by one of our ministers and will feature a conversation with one or two or even several of our beloved church members. They'll answer a handful of questions about their story, about objects or artifacts that represent their journey, about questions or doubts they wrestle with, and why they are a member, and finally, what gives them hope. As you listen to their wisdom and laughter, their audacious hope and abundant love, I trust you'll be as inspired and moved as I am on the regular. T.S. Eliot once asked, "What life have you if you have not life together?" Join us this season for Life Together. Well, welcome everybody to our Life Together podcast recording. I'm so delighted today to have Sara Sinal here with me. Let me tell you a little bit about Sara because she is wonderful and you're about to learn all the reasons why, or at least all that will fit in about 30 minutes of a conversation. Sara Sinal has been married to Paul for, what did we just say? 54 years. My goodness. They have lived in Winston-Salem for a very long time. Sara is from Kings Mountain, North Carolina. And she, during her career in medicine, she was a professor at Wake Forest in the med school, professor of pediatrics, and also served at Brenner's Children's Hospital as part of Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center as a pediatrician, and then later was certified as a child abuse pediatrician and did that for, you said 35 years? Is that right? 35 years. My gosh. They pass quickly, don't they?
They do.
Yes. Paul and Sara have 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren ranging from 8th grade to law school.
Right.
And they have such a full and wonderful life here in Winston-Salem. And it is such a joy to have you here at First Baptist on Fifth, but also here in conversation today. So I'm really looking forward to it.
It's a joy to be at First Baptist.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So I'm just going to launch right into these questions. So Sara, tell us your story, particularly the people, places, or season of your life that have most powerfully shaped, for good or ill, your understanding of God and self.
I grew up in a small town, and it was interesting. My dad was a Baptist. My mother was Methodist. Mm-hmm. And because he was a family physician and was never at church, she went to the Methodist church. And we grew up in the Methodist church. Mm-hmm. And I think I was powerfully influenced by the good people in that church. Mm. They were so supportive and good to youth, and it was a very middle class society, mm-hmm. and a lot of people just knocked themselves out to be supportive of the youth, mm-hmm. and I appreciated that mm-hmm. very much. When we came to Winston-Salem, Paul went to Cornell to get a PhD, mm-hmm. and then I was in medical school at Chapel Hill. Mm-hmm. And then we came back to Winston-Salem for Paul to go to law school, and I did my 3 years of my residency here. Mm-hmm. We decided to join Wake Forest Baptist mm-hmm. because we knew professors from having been undergraduates at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
And so that was where we knew the most people.
Sure.
And that was actually really interesting to know your professors as adults.
Yeah, right. They're real life humans. They don't just teach classes. Yeah.
So the dean of women, Lou Leak, turned out to be just your loveliest person.
Wow.
And that church, Richard Groves was minister there for a number of years after Warren Carr, but Richard said church was hard. And being in that church was hard because it seemed like we always had some sort of turmoil going on. I think before our time, it was a race relations thing.
Yep.
But then when I was there was a lot of LGBTQ issues.
Sure.
And one of our assistant ministers wanted to have a blessing ceremony and did, which probably was the beginning of the end of Wake Forest Baptist Church because the administration was not at all happy with that.
The administration of the university. Yeah, sure.
They felt that it hurt the fundraising for the divinity school, which it probably did. But that idea that money was more important than principle was very hard for me and for us.
Sure.
And, at any rate, Wake Forest Baptist eventually ended up closing. And that was a very difficult time.
Yeah. Sure.
I still feel somewhat angry. I mean, as an undergraduate who tries to be very supportive of Wake Forest, but also as a long-term member of the church, it was a real conflict. And still I feel somewhat angry about it because I do feel like that money was the issue instead of religion. So all of those things, I think, shaped me. But the other thing I would say is the goodness of people.
Yeah.
I saw God through the goodness of people. And at the medical school, at the hospital, parents whose children were really sick themselves were so supportive of other children whose parents couldn't be there.
Wow.
And one of my friends, who was a nurse, child died of leukemia. And she developed a program called Because We Care, which was to sort of take care of parents whose children died.
Oh, wow.
And so a member of the staff would be assigned to each parent in that situation, stay in contact with them over the next year or so. At Christmas time, they had probably the saddest Christmas service you would ever go to, where they had a Christmas tree with an angel on it or a heart or whatever with a name or a star with the name of every child who had died, and the parents would go up and get their...
Wow.
But it was that kind of, having suffered tragedy yourself, but still being able to look at the needs of other people and administer to other people. I think I see God in that.
Oh, absolutely. That takes extraordinary strength to show up in such a comforting way in the most excruciating of times. I mean, my goodness.
Absolutely. Wow. And then there were parents, who had pretty severely abnormal children, developmental delayed, who were so devoted to those children.
Yes, of
such
course.
Excellent parents. And since I was doing child abuse and seeing maybe some not so excellent parents, it was nice to see the wonderful parents balance that out.
I mean, I would imagine 35 years of working with children and families, you have seen all sorts of versions of what it looks like to be a family.
I felt grateful for it. Not only were the children so much fun, and I would, I may be having a bad day and I'd go see a child and they would be so cute, so funny that it just completely reversed that bad mood. But just, just seeing how good people were was so important. I thought. So wonderful.
Yeah. And I would imagine that probably encouraged you as you did your work to feel that same love coming back at you. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I that's the one thing I miss about being retired are the families that I worked with. We didn't have, it was very hard to find a rheumatologist, pediatric rheumatologist. They're few and far between.
Really?
So for a long time, I did the rheumatology. And so I had about 100 kids with arthritis and got very attached to them.
Yeah, sure. Oh, gosh. So I wonder, Sarah, if there is a particular object or artifact that can represent for you kind of what your journey of life and faith has looked like. And if so, what would it be?
I'm not sure about that question, but the thing that came to mind was because you all gave Bibles to the second graders.
Yes.
And when Paul and I married, the church gave us a Bible.
Is that right?
And I've continued to use that, and it's very meaningful to me and sort of represents the love I got from that church from childhood on.
Yes. Oh, what a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
I may have to borrow that idea.
I think couples would appreciate it.
That's right.
One day I got a call from the information desk, and they said there was somebody there. If you had a minute, somebody wanted to see you. This was just like a year or so before I retired. So Paul and I had been married 40 years at that point, probably.
Yeah.
And it was the minister who had married us.
Oh, my goodness.
He said he just liked to check on couples. And
checking up, making sure everything is going well.
Which I thought was so cool.
That is really sweet. I love that. Now, when you're describing your life, particularly your working life and all the different families and children you saw in the course of your work, I can only imagine that there would be times of really questioning why things happen and why there are some children that are so loved and others that are so neglected. And then, so I just wonder, my next question is just what questions or doubts do you wrestle with the most?
Well, in that line, that's when Paul's stepmother, who was a lovely person, had been a nun for 35 years before she left the convent and married Paul's dad. Oh, wow. But she was a real believer in angels.
Oh, wow.
And she gave us all little angel things to go on our car, on our the little thing that comes down, sunscreen or whatever it's called.
Yes.
And I knew one day she was going to ask me what I thought if I believed in angels. And I was dreading it.
Oh, no. Right.
And, I told her I have trouble with why an angel, doesn't help this child with leukemia.
Yeah.
But does the other.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And that when I was a resident, now most kids with cancer live, but in those days they almost all died.
Wow.
And when I was a resident, I had 6 weeks of oncology, pediatric oncology, and I almost lost it.
Oh, I'm sure.
And that just seems so unfair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Life seems so unfair for these children and their families.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was tough. But the religious question, I guess, I struggle with is the idea of heaven and hell.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
And, there's some people so mean that you wish there were a hell, because that would be the only justification.
Sure.
But heaven, when my grandmother died, and my mother took it really, really hard. I remember I was probably a teenager then. But at the year anniversary, all my grandmother's sisters wrote to my mother and said, just imagine how wonderful a year in heaven would be.
Wow.
And that was very meaningful to my mother. And I thought at the time and do now, it would be so cool to believe that.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
That there's this wonderful place and this person is now, happy and healthy and, but I have trouble with it, that concept.
Yeah, I understand that.
And our friend Carl Harris, I don't know whether you knew Carl, but
I didn't know.
Well, he was a Greek professor at Wake Forest and was a member of Wake Forest Baptist Church, but he and his wife Lucille were good friends of ours. And Carl was an extremely wise person. And he one time said that his idea of heaven was the ripple effect of a life well lived on earth.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I like that.
Yeah. That sounds like something we can get on board with.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a beautiful quote. And I mean, I can so resonate with struggling with the concepts of an afterlife and what it looks like, what it feels like, why it's necessary. And yet I too, in my life and ministry, have heard from a number of people who find such comfort. That example you gave of how beautiful a year in heaven, what that would be like. And for so many people, that is such a comforting hope, for
Right.
what,
And I
what is
want
to
that
come.
for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you so much for sharing that. So my next question is about how or why did you come to be a member of First Baptist on Fifth? And the sort of second half of this question is there any quintessential First Baptist story you want to share? Now, granted, I'll say this for those of you listening, Sara and Paul joined our church last year. So there may not be a quintessential First Baptist story, but if you have a quintessential Wake Forest Baptist story, I'd love to hear that too.
Well, I've said all along that I thought Race Lamb was God's gift to Wake Forest Baptist Church because our minister, Leah Scholl, was leaving. And Race had been ordained and was also assistant dean at the Divinity School. And he agreed to be an interim minister. And he was just wonderful the way he led us through that whole process. It would have been very much more painful had he not been there. But he brought in ministers from various churches, you being one of them, that he thought people would like and that the churches that he thought we were compatible with.
Yeah, sure.
And then after that, I visited several of those churches. Having grown up Methodist, I thought I had always been attracted to Centenary, such a beautiful church, and the music. Paul loves music, so the music is so wonderful. But it wasn't a great time to be a Methodist because they were going through the LGBTQ things we'd already done that. But I didn't want to do it again.
Right.
I really didn't.
Right.
But when we came to First Baptist, we knew a few people, Richard and Nikki and Lynn Rhodes, people that we loved. But everybody was so friendly and so welcoming. I mean, just knocked themselves out to welcome us. We got notes. We got, all kinds of things. And your sermons are fabulous.
Oh, you're so kind.
And the music is good.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So it met all the, and I was very impressed with all the mission work that's being done.
Sure.
And so all of those things made us decide this was the church for us.
Oh, I'm so glad that you did. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. Now, is there any particular story, either from your time here or your long year? Well, how many years were you and Paul members at Wake Forest Baptist?
I think we probably joined when our older daughter was 4 or 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was finishing residency and everything. So that would have been 79 or 80, something like that.
Okay, wow.
So we were members there a long time.
Yeah. It's a lot of life to live with the church family. Are there particular stories that, if you had to sum up Wake Forest Baptist in a story, what that would be?
Well, there are a few little things that stand out in my way. One of them was Ed Chrisman, who's just the cutest man ever. And he and my daughter, Katie, had a game where they would play tag in the church.
Oh my goodness.
Usually after church.
Yes.
But, they were they gave a lot of opportunities for our daughters through the church. And Lynn Rhodes at one point. And did you know Vicki Tamer? She was minister. Okay, well, she was youth minister.
Okay.
A lot of mission trips and as I said, leading opportunities to lead worship in various ways that were very meaningful. Now, why they no longer go to church is a good question. And I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, that's right.
So many of my friends whose children grew up in church,
yeah, sure,
their children don't go to church.
Sure. Sure.
And I grieve a little about that.
Yeah, I understand that. I was recently at a funeral of one of my close friends' fathers who died last month, and it became like a youth group reunion of those fellow kids that were my age who had come back to support our friends and this death in their life. And a number of them aren't active in a church either. And I think we all felt the warmth and sort of embrace that we had experienced as teenagers. We sort of felt that wave again. And, as a pastor, of course, I would love for all of these wonderful people to come back to church. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of them will.
I know.
You never know.
That's true. That's true. So my last question for you today is, what gives you hope right now? Where are you finding hope?
This community, this community of believers who are so interested in helping other people, serving other people, and being supportive of each other.
Yeah.
I think that's very hopeful.
Yeah.
I won't get into politics, but more hopeful there than was a few weeks ago.
Sure.
So, I still believe that there are more good people than bad people.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. You have to just keep supporting them. And
that's right.
Encouraging them. So.
Well, Sara Sinal, what a gift you are. Thank you so much for sharing this time.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. And thank you for everything you do for the church and for this church.
That's right. Yeah. I'm so grateful too. We do this together, don't we?
Right.
We do.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, blessings to all of you listening, and we'll catch you next time.